Welcome to another episode of The Breakdown. Today is March 23rd that we're recording this. You're probably watching this not on March 23rd because there's editing sorcery that has to be done. But we're talking today about a topic that has become oddly, there's been a resurgence of conversation around it, and it's particularly timely because March 31st is the Trans Day of Visibility. It's an important day, and it's one, particularly given the climate that we're seeing, everything going on, that we didn't want to leave unmarked. So tonight we're very excited to present a conversation with somebody who's done a little bit of advocacy in this particular sandbox. I had the privilege of having a conversation with her a little while back. We're very excited to welcome to this show for the first time, Mattie McMillan. Mattie, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Well, howdy, and thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So let's start with the broad things. I mean, I had a conversation with you a little while back after an NDP nomination. But let's assume that there's some folks maybe listening or watching tonight that haven't heard that conversation. So let's go back to the very beginning. Who is Mattie McMillan?
Well, howdy. I'm Mattie McMillan. Born and raised Calgarian. Grew up in the shadow of Nose Hill, up alongside Nose Creek. Settler Crown side of Treaty 7 Partnership. My pronouns are she, her, they, them. I'm a person of many spectrums. I'm a trans femme, non-binary, X-marker Canadian. And I'm glad to be sharing time with you and the audience tonight. As a trans person, I see a lot of frontline and get to live a lot of backline experiences. But my day job has been for more than a decade, Alberta politics, accessing and using legislation. So it's a fun little situation I found myself in as being equipped to talk and to move on these issues and grow networks. So I'm very excited to share the time and to talk a little bit to illuminate folks on some of the barriers folks see, but also just to highlight what they'll be seeing when they hear about Trans Day Visibility ahead.
So before we get into the meatier parts of the conversation, I think there's one important thing that I would like to say, and then I would like you to tell me if I'm saying something wrong. And so the big thing that I want to
I don't normally get the opportunity. I normally just bite my tongue and keep on with my day, so I'm excited.
Oh no, you can tell me how wrong I am for the many, many times that I undoubtedly will be wrong in this conversation. So please don't hold back. But one of the big mistakes, it seems to me that one of the big mistakes that we consistently see in the conversations around trans issues is the representation that the trans people are some sort of monolith, and that the experience of being trans, or the definition of being trans, is a fixed thing that everybody experiences the same way. Would I be safe to say that we should stop treating trans people like any demographic really, but because of what we're talking about tonight, we should stop having the conversation around trans people like trans people are some sort of monolith?
You meet one Canadian, you've met one Canadian. You meet one Albertan, you've met one Albertan. You meet one trans person, you've met one person who's experienced a lot of those experiences, but it's not a plethora. No person is an island to themselves. And it's more so a broad-reaching way that we in societies, we like labels for good or for bad, but it's a way that people can self-identify and find community. Hopefully good communities. I'm glad that I've found good niches, but I was talking with someone the other day, and we're a demographic that, one, is a lot smaller than most. You look at Statistics Canada, 1 in 200. We're also a demographic that intergenerational wealth transfer or knowledge transfer doesn't happen, because what makes us doesn't have to do with intergenerationalness. Trans folk are ubiquitous. We're everywhere, and we have been, because this is what happens in nature. So with all of that, there's so many experiences that you can't just lump into this is the one way that people live lives. I'd argue that one thing that defines transness is that you're not cis, you're not in the same spot. If you think of like Apollo 11, they talk about a cis orbit and they talk about a translunar orbit. And One gets you to places, and one just you're in one spot. You're already where you are. Uh, is there a trans monolith? No. Is there a trans agenda? There's tens of thousands, because we're everywhere. We're next door. We're at your grocery store. We're helping you at the hospital, just like all sorts of other folks that aren't exactly like you, but they're still Albertan or still Canadian.
Now, I want to be clear. When you say that there's tens of thousands of trans agendas,
Because there's tens of thousands. I myself have many agendas. I have a habit of keeping one on my calendar. I also have a written one. So there's two agendas right there. One trans person.
there we go. So there's, to be clear, there's not like, and it just pains me that I have to ask this question, but you guys don't have meetings where you're going to talk about how you're going to take over everything, right? Like that's not a thing.
No. But when we do meet, we talk about how great it is to be able to meet. And we do talk about how able it is to have thoughts and dreams and hopes and to plan for the future. That's why I say there's thousands, but no, there's no bat signal in everyone who ingest their hormones as opposed to makes it locally. They don't all rally and show up. That's not the first rule of Trans Club. The first rule of Trans Club is don't define other people's trans experiences. So even though I have my own and I've written some stuff, like there's going to be things I say tonight and I say tomorrow that might not reflect someone's direct experiences or experiences they've been around. I'm me, I carry what I got. So that's my hedge tonight. So if I say anything a little bit off, please call me out in the DMs as opposed to in the front end, because I'd love to talk it through and broaden my lessons and experiences.
I find myself wondering now what a trans bat signal would even look like.
Oh, it'd be awesome. We're talented folk.
I'm
We're
no
resourceful and we can see great perspectives in whatever we see.
Perfect. So let's talk a little bit. Let's define some terms as or undefine some terms. Maybe might be a better way to.
I'll give you some
it.
ballparks. Yeah.
There we go. So what does let's pretend that I don't know anything about any trans stuff at all. Let's pretend I know nothing. What does trans mean?
I just put away my phone. Trans is Latin origin. A lot of our words have Latin origins. There's sort of two that go hand in hand: cis and lunar, or cis and trans. And when I talk to other folks, I've been thinking about the trans experience my whole life because I've been living it. But I can appreciate other folks haven't been thinking about it for 30 years. And I understand that our society has sort of been suppressing language and thought on it for about a century or so. Cis, again, I think of spaceships, cis orbit, cis Earth orbit is you're in one spot. You're where you're meant to be or where you're set up. When you think of that in a cisgender context, that's you're born into the meat carriage, the carbons all attached to each other in the way you like it set up. Now, broad scoping, if a cis orbit or a cis lunar orbit is where it just orbits the moon, a translunar orbit is an orbit that gets you somewhere. It crosses from the Earth to the moon. So in my experience, I see trans as being, I was born in a setup that wasn't by my choice, and I knew I could feel it was wrong, and I knew things could be better. And it's important to note you can have those feelings and not identify as trans. You can have those feelings, identify as trans, and not take outside affirmative action, whether that be because it doesn't matter why. Everyone has agency. But for a lot of folks, trans means going from one setup to another. And everything I'm going to talk about today is sort of in a spectrum. So there is no, this is the exact spot of being male or a man or of having sex hormone producing capabilities. It's like, no, there's a spectrum. Same thing on femininity or on, as well as the hormones that run our systems. So a lot of times, I have an uncle who equated it pretty well. It's like, oh, you're a diesel engine that was running off of gas. for some. It's like really bad for the engine. Don't know how it worked for so long. But now that we have the right fuel and we cleaned out the spark plugs, things are running great. So that's my ballpark of cis and trans. A lot of folks will be, man, oh, don't call me that. And I can appreciate being called things you don't want to be called. It can upset a day. But when we look in things of perspectives or scientific lenses, yeah, we put binaries and descriptors on. If you feel really discomfort from being affirmed as who you are in the body you are and how you're displaying yourself, maybe you should consider, is this a cis behavior? Maybe I should go and talk to some friends or the internet or some therapists and get perspective.
Do you think part of the reason why some cis people have a difficult time wrapping their heads around what it means to be trans is because it is, cis is, correct me if I'm wrong, by definition, largely binary. So you're either male or female, and that's the equation. And if you came that way, you stay that way, and that's what that is. And what you're describing is this not binary, where
But,
let me try
and that isn't to say that everyone is spread out and there's a ranking and you can put everyone on earth in a lineup and who is the manliest. There are clusters of folks, and like as we said earlier, like labels have strength in building community, whatever that community is, and they can also hurt communities by being applied. But in a world where there's many ways to be a man, in a world where there's many ways to be a woman, it could be possible, and I will pitch that things could be a spectrum, and spectrums change at all times. We see it in species that aren't humans. We see it in species that are humans, but for a long time we haven't looked at things that way. Something that I recently got heckled about is like there's 2 chromosomes and that sort of thing. A lot of our science has been boiled down, and if you look at internet or professional and high level sports, they used to do a lot of these tests and they stopped doing it because people realized, oh, human bodies are way more complex. There is not just 2 setups. Your hips can be 4 common clusters of ways, but there's many ways. There is not a perfect way to be a person aside from being the person that you want to set yourself up to be.
I think the metaphor that I got to process it a little bit as you were talking, and I think the metaphor that I was trying to go with is if you think of like the cis folks that have a harder time wrapping their heads around this, they've only ever been exposed to one flavor of ice cream. And it's always been vanilla. Vanilla is a great flavor.
It's the most popular flavor of a lot of things.
All of a sudden, somebody walked them into a Ben and Jerry's, and they're just like, no, only vanilla. Is that an okay metaphor? Can I use that one?
Yeah, I would take it and I'd extend it a bit. For a long time, our world has been set up in a way that there's only one right way to eat ice cream, and it is vanilla, and you will eat it this way. So for folks who've been learned to repress everything, I want chocolate ice cream, or I want whatever, I don't want ice cream at all. A lot of folks have been pushed into a narrative of being safe as eating vanilla ice cream. Using this method, I like vanilla. But now we live in a world where there aren't those constraints. And a lot of people see, well, a life without the rails is not the right life, and that can lead to a lot of trouble, and it's danger, and I care about people, and I got to get the word out. There's this, I think he's an ex-psychiatrist out from Toronto. He is a professor, and he has some YouTubes or whatever. And he gets a lot of attention, Jordan something. He gets a lot of attention for telling people there's one right way to live, and your life gets better when you just fall back into that line. But the thing I think that we don't think about is, how was it so easy for that life to have it so easy? And it's okay, there are consequences to our actions, whether we're aware of them or not. And when we become awoken to things, we can either choose to go back to sleep like sheep, or we can do stuff about it. So, and there are times that folks can't do stuff about it. You can't change the world that's set up just for ice cream in our metaphor. Or there's times that I didn't feel safe coming out for a long chunk of time, both because I didn't have the character experience points, but also because of the worlds that I saw. I'm glad that I saw there was more of a world of ice cream. For those of you who don't like the ice cream reference and like movies, one that comes up very often is Pleasantville, a world that's black and white, and it's very easy to understand where you fit. And as color comes, some people love all the things they can do and experience and how life becomes even deeper, even if you're not a painter. But there's folks who, this isn't how the world is set up, and it's going to be danger for us. Different is danger, and danger is scary. And when people are scared, they get driven a lot more by their body as opposed to their heart and mind.
I have to just comment before I move on to my next sort of question. I think you might have just defined woke in that thing there, and I was told that was impossible.
Well, I hope no one takes that and puts it on the internet. I can understand there's a lot of criticism about wokeness.
Well,
I took the wrong pill. Was I supposed to take the red pill?
That has always been lost on me because I'm colorblind. So when people start talking about, red pill, blue pill, my mind has not existed in a space where color is a defining factor of things. So I can honestly never remember which one's the bad one. I would make a terrible Matrix occupant.
So long ago, there was this red pill that folks like me long ago, when there was less options for hormone replacement therapies for trans or cis folk, you'd take a red pill. And red pill is estrogen, and you can take it and it can change your life. Or you can choose not to take the pill at all and take the other one. Now, over time, like the estradiol I take is a blue pill. So it's actually flipped. If you look at who created the Matrix movies, they have shared experiences. I identify as having shared experiences with them. And they created a whole franchise of, you can live in the world that you're told is right, and everything should work roughly. Or you can make the conscious choice of liberty with all its horrid costs, but all its great liberties. So I find it really funny that folks who don't like being woke, they gotta get an internet connection that's better than what they got now.
Blew my mind with that bit in the Matrix because I did not know that the colors correlated with hormones. So that's
an anecdote that a lot of people have heard, but I wasn't there. All I can tell you is the pills were red, now they're blue.
Sounds good. Let's talk a little bit about some of the other misconceptions that exist. One of the common refrains that is used is, "I don't understand how someone can just choose to be a different gender than what they were born." Let's talk about that word choice, because I feel like, and again, I'm going to defer to you entirely on this, choice probably isn't the right word to be involved here.
So, one, there is no answer to this because we live in a country where there's enough liberty of agency. And the only person who has to be aware and willing to act is that person. So with that hedge out of the way, there's many ways and different thoughts of science for folks. But the reality is, if you know something is true on your own, it doesn't matter how much the world is attuned or set up for that to be real or not. It's true to you. It's how you're set up. For folks who can't fathom it, I've heard a funny thing of like offering pills. I'll give you some of my hormones, and most people would be like, "No, thank you. I'm in the setup I want." There's jokes of like, if you're cis people don't think about being trans every hour, every waking day. It's just because they're already set up how things are. So if the question is, what should you say to cis folks who don't understand what the discomforts could be? Tell them to celebrate that they were born and they're set up and they're ready to go at the get-go. Now, there's a lot of strengths in being trans whenever you realize or come out or however your paths go. Um, but normally you get a lot of different experience points before you get to live as yourself. And not everyone gets to live as themselves, even when they try. Another way of looking at it is, I don't know if you've had, and this is more of a parallel or this is a story to convey a point rather than any truth. The truest part of this lie. You're in a world where a new technology opens and you can now see another part of the world, and someone has had the very similar experiences to you, things that you never thought were true, or you were told were never true, things that when you were close, you either shied away from or were forced to shy away from because that world wasn't set up, but you know it can happen elsewhere. That's sort of what it's like. Now, the joyous part is being in Canada. We're in that spot that people like me can live like me. Another country this week banished homosexuality. Not every trans person identifies as homosexual. Some are hetero, some are pan. That's about who you interact with and how you like interacting, as opposed to who you are, as opposed to what your meat carriage is set up as, what all those little carbons are set up together. I hope that gives a little bit of context. Can I explore one of those many allegories?
Yeah, I think it does. But what I'm trying to get at is the notion that there's this notion that it's a choice of convenience. And you know, I just woke up one day and I decided, you know what, I'm not gonna be I don't want to be in this meat. It's not even I don't want to. I'm just gonna choose to redecorate my meat carriage. Because it's a day that ends in Y, and that's the only reason. It's not that simple, and I think that what I'm trying to explore a little bit is, for my understanding, is that for a lot of people who identify as trans, wherever they are on that spectrum, it is a deeply internal, something's not right. Like, this isn't, I'm not in the meat carriage the way that I'm supposed to be. Am I getting it wrong?
I only have my experiences, and I can only use the hearsay of what I've heard say. But you're right. Is it easy? It's a lot easier to just live up to expectations, unless those expectations don't match with who you are. Now, whether you're trans or something else that makes you not match up to expectations, don't matter. Like that, the easy route is to just give in and to be who other people tell you who you are. So it's not, is it an easy thing? No. Well, kids think it's easy. It took me a very long time to be able to say and be who I knew I was. When you see an 8-year-old, when you see a 15-year-old who is openly identifying as trans, you're looking at one of the strongest people you will see that day, that month, that year. It's folks like that that give me strength. And people who come out older, whether my age or a little bit beyond, they have their own experiences, and those experiences aren't the same either. Being in the setup or in the direction of the setup you want at different periods and for different durations are going to change things. But is it easy? It gets easier. That's the important part. When you commit to being yourself, it gets easier. That doesn't mean it isn't hard, but when you're moving in a direction that you want to go, at least you have that. Even falling down is falling in the right place, and you can keep going, and it gives you strength to get back up. So is it an easy thing to just be trans? It's the easiest thing I've ever been. It's hard to be accepted as trans in this world, in a world that doesn't talk about it. But what would I say to folks who think it's easy? I would really encourage them to look at the value of Friday, 31st of March. Trans Day of Visibility came about because there's sort of other things in this community calendar, and not everyone follows the calendar. I joke with other folks, Trans Day of Visibility, that's every day. We have Pride Month. A lot of people celebrate Pride, some in different ways. In Calgary, we have Pride Week by Labor Day, front end of September, sort of end of summer, start of getting back to things. At the end of November, there's Trans Day of Remembrance, and that remembers that a lot of trans people die. A lot of trans people die at the hands of others, and a lot of trans people die at the hands of society that sort of forces their hands. We are a demographic that you don't see good things about for a very long time in our current media era. I knew what trans people were for because of Ace Ventura. Very bad perspectives. The summary of that movie is the villain was trans, and it's okay to not treat them like a human anymore. An era where nicer treatment of trans people comes on Maury Povich and objectification. And that's only one layer. I'm sure there's someone screaming right now saying, what about intersectionality? And the truth is, like, I grew up in the prairies in a land, I grew up in boy land and was exposed to a lot of brutal, demeaning perspectives on how women should be treated. And seeing that, one, it tricks your brain into things that aren't true because that's what everyone else says, but it also restricts, well, it internalizes stuff. So internalized misogyny, we're victims and we're beneficiaries of the worlds we grow up in. And for a very long time, that didn't exist. So we have Pride Month, we have Pride Week here, we have Trans Day of Remembrance. But the thought was, we're remembering people who've died, and that's important. But we need to remember and make visible the people today and the barriers that they face. So it's two sides of the coin. I'm telling people to go look at it because there's resources that celebrate the liberties. I can be visible here. I was on a phone call a couple of weeks ago with someone who called me it, and I can't exist in that country. I can't exist in that, or not in that country, but in that state. But I can here. So making visible our liberties. I'm doing a little thing with some trans folks in Calgary at the end of the month. And one of the questions in sort of RSVP land was, how do we be a better place? And a lot of people, I want to hold hands in public. And at the same time, people are saying, I want to celebrate being able to hold hands in public. So an extension, the long and short of it is, for folks who don't understand and for folks who think it's easy, Trans Day of Visibility at the end of the month is a great opportunity to see A, barriers that you might never have known existed, and B, how you can help, how you can improve a day. It's like when you hold a door open for someone, you know you're helping them in that situation. I'm sure in your life you've held a door open long enough that someone benefited and you didn't see it. What if you can find more of those doors to hold open when it costs you nothing? Because it can change a lot of people's days. And it means the more that we lean into trans visibility, the more we see trans adults thrive, the more kids live. And the less folks that we have to remember at the end of November.
I want to talk a little bit about one of the other areas that we see. I'm trying to use diplomatic language and not use profanity, but we see some, let's say, resistance, and in the more mild cases, and certainly some more offensive attacking, has to do with the use of pronouns. So, I mean, it's always struck me as kind of a silly thing for people to get upset about. Like, why do you want me to use this pronoun for you? Like, if the most oppressive thing that I experience from another human being is them saying, please use the right terminology, I'm doing okay. But taking that aside, why are pronouns important?
They let us communicate, and not just the words themselves, but when I set an expectation of what my pronouns are, when I want to engage and build and collaborate in conversation, someone who actively chooses to disregard the map that I made to win me over, that's red flags. And that means the communication is going to be poor because of a choice to not use words that were said. This is how you communicate. This is my comms frequency. This is what I'd like being called. If that can't be respected, you can't collaborate as easy. I feel amazing. I can't imagine how many English teachers are just boiling over with rage for how many times, how many years they've taught people about pronouns. It's just, this is what happens in sentences. This is what happens when we put pronouns ahead of nouns when the nouns have significance, or when they go attached. In some languages, all things are gendered, but English has its own setup. Pronouns are important not just for communication's sake, but they're also for our identity, but also as individuals, but our identity as a society. I don't want to live in a society where someone else assigns a label to me and I have to live by it, period. That's not just me because of me being trans and lived experience. That's tyranny. That's that Jordan guy we were talking about. There's one right way to live and it has been declared and you have nothing to say about it. That ain't liberty. That's tyranny. That ain't freedom. That's freedom from liberty. That's freedom from communication. That's freedom from collaboration. So when I hear people purposely, like, to me, when they give purposeful mispronouns, all I know is that they're missing out on an opportunity. And not only are they missing out on an opportunity for them, they're wrong-footing every other person I'm going to interact with that day. It's not my choice, but if you get a shake of a pop can, you don't know how many shakes it is when you come time to open it. And folks purposely wrong-footing people from participating in society is going to lead to all sort of foment if we apply this lens to other groups of people. But right now, I don't know if it's the demographics. I don't know if they got good Twitter algorithms, but it's a brutal part of humanity that's showing that could have been solved in English class. It ain't your business what other people's pronouns are. It is your business how you choose to collaborate or just stay clear. Ain't no one. I'm not walking down the street forcing people to say diddly to me.
It's, and you used a word that I think is really, really for me important to highlight. Where you were talking, no, not that one, the purposeful one, and I think that that's a really important piece, because I think that there's this perception that if you make a mistake, that you are going to be vilified, or that you're going to be held up in the court of public opinion, and everybody's going to go and say very bad things about you. There is a tremendous difference between making a mistake and being, I'm just going to be a jerk, and I'm gonna try to reassert my worldview over yours because I am a scared, insecure human being. What would you say to people who are afraid of making mistakes when it comes to pronouns?
It's going to happen. People say they misstep all the time. Sometimes they know they misstep, sometimes they don't. It's going to happen. It's not so much the focus of when you stumble. It's what do you do after the stumble? Do you go into a stride? Do you let it take you down? Do you go into defensive mode? And it's hard. It can be hard. Again, I made the line like, again, I'm talking my perspectives, and that's informed by my experiences. But I've known people all my life. And some of those people were misinformed what my pronouns are. And I don't see those people every day, and they're not in my head every day. So sometimes something that's been entrenched into them, and I see the heartbreak in their eyes of, I don't want this person to think that I'm malicious or destroying them. And at times, like, I'm not giving an off the hook thing. It hurt. It can hurt. It can hurt saying who you are and then seeing someone who you love do something that hurts your feelings. And you've said it hurts your feelings because it's not matching who you are. But the truth is, there's context, and you can't expect people to be one exact right way all the time, because that's what Jordan and the Tyrants want. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I have a very close friend who is trans, and I knew him before he transitioned, and he has been spectacularly generous with me in regards to, you're telling a story about a thing that happened before, and because in your head the story involves that person as they were before they transitioned, it's easier to make a mistake, and it's just a mistake. It's not a malicious thing. Um, and I think that there's a, I've done a lot of work to try to be proactive, and I've asked questions, which I think this is where I'm going to ask you another question. But I think asking questions is kind of important. How should people ask questions when they have them, do you think? Speaking from your own experience.
Good question. Uh, I'll give an answer for 90% of people, and it's okay if you're not equipped to do this. If you have questions, go to a computer and type google.com.
Okay.
Like a lot of other groups that the world is not set up for in current setup, trans people be busy. We got stuff to do, or we got recovering to do. And although, like, there are times that I feel comfortable sharing my experience because it's useful for me personally, there's times that it's helpful for giving a greater context, and there's times that I don't want to talk about it. It's horrible living in a crisis moment and then having to give the director cut narrative to the person causing the situation to you. They don't know that they're in the scene, but gosh, I don't have time to live as a human and to explain to you things that you can find elsewhere, and maybe it's leaning and expecting too much from this group. I've been guilty of that in communities I identify with, and I've been guilty of that of communities I have friends with. Don't expect a yes once means a yes always. Seek out consent where you think that, okay, maybe there's a window. Don't open with demanding. Don't open with expecting. Open with honesty. I'm confused about this. I want to know about this. Use words like what and how. Don't use words of why. That's an FBI negotiator trick. If you say why, that assumes there's a reason and fault to be had. I don't want to put fault. I want to know what is causing this. How do we overcome this? Not why does this happen to you people? As an example, words have meaning even if we don't agree that words have meaning. Words have meaning and words have impacts. It's important to ask questions. I want to flashback for a second, talking about flashbacks. Some people find it doesn't make sense. I had someone use dead name pronouns or old pronouns, one set, default, factory setting, not useful, I upgraded. But their commentary in the story was, it's important to know the gender here. And it's funny because to me, the importance, a person who's not a man would not be right in this situation and be uncomfortable for them. And it's funny to me of like, you are getting to something that is very true, but it's just so hard to fathom. And that's a dangerous thing. So questions help bridging the gap of decision makers not being able to fathom the crisis you're in, being blind to not a color, but a whole segment or experience of reality because you just never got those experience points. Questions are important. Pronouns are important. Visibility is important.
Would somebody earn bonus points for saying, hey, Mattie, I Googled this thing and I want to just run it by you? Is that
Unless you know someone who has a business card that says editor, don't expect them to be your editor unless they say that they're a proofreader and you've agreed to an interaction. I think that's the important part. It's agreeing to the interaction before throwing it at someone's step. In some communities, there's offerings or gifts before you do formal things, because we are in this mode right now. I have a difficulty when people come into the room I'm in and think that I'm ready to talk to them, because I'm busy doing my stuff. But I can appreciate that they want to talk to me, but I'm not set up. So making sure that the conversation you want to have is appropriate to who you're talking with, and it's the right setting, and that they're consenting to it before saying, I have a question about this. Identify, I want to talk about it. I have a question about this. Consent, consent, consent. There's many ways to life, and you can't learn about diversity without questions.
Now, you mentioned dead naming in there. So I want to just define that term as well for anybody who's not familiar. What is dead naming?
It's hard to define. Uh, People who are alive have, that's hard. Okay, dead name is the name that is dead to that person. It doesn't apply to this person. This name is dead. The person is not dead. Maybe it's because they stopped using their dead name. Now, we talked a bit about words having meaning, impact versus intent. Some people will use names that aren't affiliated with, and it doesn't matter if it's a government. I did an Interact e-transfer today, and I had to tell the person I legally changed my name, but it hasn't got to the bank account yet. So you're going to see another bank. You're going to see my dead name. Please don't share it with other people. Please respect that. There's a line that's used, dead names are sacred, because to some people it might not matter. Lord knows I have so many pictures and me dead named in albums here, there, and everywhere. There's no undoing that. But what there is knowing, and what there is doing, is setting up yourself for a conversation with Mattie the right way, or identifying that you can't get over something that wasn't true. That wasn't right. And yeah, it's a big indicator when someone uses my dead name to me purposely. It identifies this person wants to live in one point in time, as opposed to living in reality, living in the moment, and growing with those around them. So if you leave this segment with one thing in your mind, it's that dead names are sacred and you don't use them. It's amazing to me that accountants are so good, HR is so good at getting payroll to people who use preferred names. And it's really interesting because, like, I did it myself. Preferred name. Well, I have a legal name and I have a preferred name. I changed my legal name, but I also still have my old. It can get very convoluted. Preferred name is the name that I want to use. Other people call it the true name, because this is the name that is true. It isn't someone else's label. I applied it to myself. The important key is using someone's name opens the opportunity to collaborating with them, growing, learning from them. When you indirectly harm them, you indirectly harm yourself. When you directly harm them, you're still harming yourself, because you're denying yourself the opportunity of all those experiences and sharing.
What is your reaction, if you don't mind answering the question, when you see some of the harmful rhetoric? I don't know why it's coming back so bad. I honestly don't. That's one of the things that I've been trying to figure out for the last couple of months, because we have seen such a resurgence in what I would quite comfortably personally call hate speech, that has been viciously directed towards the trans community. And I think it's important to highlight a lot of it is just straight up lies. And we're seeing these lies being amplified by media, organizations. I don't know that there's a whole lot that can be done to stop them from doing what they're doing, other than to talk about what the impact is of that rhetoric. So if obviously I don't want to push you to anywhere you don't want to go, but if you could just maybe talk a little bit about, what that experience is like for you, what seeing those things is like for you, maybe some people will hear it.
Yeah. How do I feel when I hear hurtful things about me or people in general? Bad. I feel poorly. And sometimes people mean it purposely, and sometimes people don't mean it maliciously. They're just ignorant. They don't know. But that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt any less. There's a resurgence. There's a line that I heard a few weeks ago, and it's true, and I use it. I come from a social science background, history, that sort of political science, that sort of stuff. Liberties that trans folks like me haven't been seen in the world in 100 years. Not since the late 20s in Berlin have people lived so freely as me. We're also living in a period of time of huge economic uncertainty, war and pressures on old systems, uncertainty of who belongs in what groups, and other people are allowed to have liberties. And in history, this bends bad. We live in a world, though, that has access to information, and that's how you overcome that. You can never out yell a bigot. Hate speech, any hate speech, is a lie, because speech designed to spread hate isn't communicating anything worth communicating. So when we see it happen to other people, we have to be aware of it. There's this bystander. It's a balance of, you don't want to be a bystander who does nothing, but you also don't want to endanger the person. Like I understand that paramedics, EMTs, and that sort of boot have to check for their own safety before entering a situation. And there's a lot of personal assessment, but when hate speech is used, it's a lie, and it could be on purpose. So being aware of what's being told to me, why is this being told to me? Sometimes things go poorly in large demographics. I could give you all sorts of conspiracy theories. I can give you all sorts of truths. But the reality is, yeah, there's a lot more of it these days. When things go bad for right-wing autocracies, trans people tend to get blamed. And when you can't blame trans people, you mock people who are drag queens. And you mock that extreme of, I'm not a drag queen. There's a song in my community that goes, I'm not a fucking drag queen. It's a pretty good song. But it's attacking similar things. This has never been here. These people don't belong. We need to see what's being reality. In Calgary, for a point of time, drag queens couldn't read books in libraries. Like, that sounds like what the vets told me at the Legion for so many years. They're attacking a group of people that is easy to attack because other people have stuff going on. Folks aren't malicious. Folks don't like it. Calgarians don't like it. Albertans don't like it. Canadians don't like it. We like our liberty. We don't always get along, but I'd say one of the few definers of a Canadian is letting other Canadians live their lives too. I think that's the other attribute. When these people stand up and they say, you are in their group, you have to be aware of what they're trying to do. Make it normal to hate a group of people. Make it right to say these people are bad and let other people know it. My brother made a good line. We live in a place where most of our cities, the majority of people aren't that way. The bigots can show up and they don't win because enough of the crowd isn't going to break with them. When we hear hate speech, no matter for who, it's chipping away at our humanity because it's designed to bore through and pull you into that camp. And it's a horrid thing. Everyone wants to belong. Everyone knows what it feels like to not belong. I would dare say everyone doesn't like the feeling of not belonging. But that's only my opinions. And the reality is, my opinions don't matter about who someone's identity is and how they choose to live in this world, so long as it doesn't hurt me. And when I say hurt, I mean physically hurt. These people go, there's this hairy leather guy who says I'm one of the evilest persons on earth and says that he's a Christian up to the wazoo. But then he goes around spewing hate. If you see a bigot, don't let it impact other people. Don't get paint on the furniture. But also realize this is just a whiny person who doesn't even know themselves. That was a little ranty, but frig, it sucks to hear slurs when you can get on with your day. So many people get mad that why can't we get on with our day? And it's because the bigots have nothing better to do. And that's how they feel like they belong. And that's the most dangerous part. Sorry, I'm going to go on for a third point here. The most dangerous part is it's the fact that when these people exist, they can flourish and they can multiply. And then they get so big that they don't think of belonging to society. And when people don't belong, that's when danger things happen. I don't belong, so I can attack, I can harm, it's going to harm me. So it's not only about preventing Nazis, but it's realizing, I think his General Patton, who said like more people worked for Germany, more Nazis worked for Germany after the war than before, because there were still people who lived there. And it's finding how do we move forward and bring these people back. So that's the third point is it's hard to estrange these people, chuds or otherwise, incels, whatever words. Like those words hurt, and some people are malicious, and those are truths, but they're still people, and it's a fine line. Don't don't do slurs. Don't do slurs.
There we go. Okay. Um, I'm going to use a word that I don't think is a slur, but I'm totally open to.
Impact, not intent.
There you go. Well, I'm hoping this one impacts a little bit, to be honest. One of the things that we've seen in the discussion lately comes from a certain lowered standard publication, I'll say, where they have manufactured some fear around the idea that a trans woman in a female's locker room is a predator of some kind. And there's two pieces that I want to sort of explore with you on that, if that's okay. The first one is why isn't it just a predator? Like, why are we including the trans part of the conversation? There's a pastor who just finished spending a bunch of time in remand, who has a remarkable amount of history when it comes to violence towards not just vulnerable people, but apparently animals as well. And he is being referred to still as, this not a predator, when he's clearly a predator. So I don't understand why do you think it is that when it comes to demographics that we like or are comfortable with, and I'm air quoting the hell out of that for anybody who's listening to the audio version of this, we'll focus on not the predator piece, but when it comes to demographics like trans people, we'll go right to the trans thing and we'll completely ignore the rest of it. Like it's the framing of it that I find. Why isn't somebody who hangs out in a washroom and goes after kids, why aren't we just calling them a pedophile? Why is the trans piece even entering into it? Do you know what? I'm not saying that like.
I think the important part of what you just said is conversation as opposed to reality. Because I will tell you, I've had a lot of conversations about bathrooms with trans people, and I have never. Normally it's about safety, or it's getting assaulted, or having to find one, or being kicked out and soiling yourself, or losing your job because they didn't provide one to you. Rarely is it I had so much time to loiter and harass someone. Why do they say there's predator trans people in the bathroom? It's because they're preaching hate. And when you preach hate, those words aren't anointed. Hate preachers preach hate, and that's what we got a case here of. I can tell you, it sucks being pushed down in a bathroom, in a pile of pee, in someone else's pee, in your own pee. It is not a good experience. It is amazing we live in a city. I'll give a shout out. He's an NDP candidate in Calgary Cross. Gurinder Gill, he gave me my first job after I came out, and we couldn't get a bathroom key for a bit. And one of these situations happened. And I'm glad in a city that when it happened then, and for other employers since, they're like, no, go home. You deserve dignity. You don't have to live out the rest of this day, reset. So when I hear being assaulted in a bathroom, I don't see it in a story of a trans person doing the assaulting. I have the experiences of having it happen to me after I came out, but also before. I've been at event. I've had over a decade of politics in Alberta, and we know what can happen in Alberta politics. And we know what can happen with certain parties. And if you put two and two together, you can understand why I don't go to some groups' parties anymore, because bad stuff happens in their bathrooms. It's just a lot greasier. I won't talk further there because I'm not a journalist or anything, but from my experiences, any interaction where there's an assault in the bathroom, it has not been the trans person doing the assault. We want to get in there. I'm speaking we as a majority, but there are folks who maybe, I don't. Loitering is not an option. Get in, get out, go. When you hear someone say that there's a trend, when you hear hate speech like that, ask yourself, how easy would it be for someone to go to a bathroom here? Not just trans people, but also unhoused folks who live far, far away. Like it's astonishing how many places folks soil themselves in the city because our infrastructure isn't set up for it. Now, trans people are robbed of that dignity, but so are a lot of other folks. Think about those things. Think about how you can open up a bathroom, one more opportunity or one more easement for people facing like that, as opposed to living in someone's delusion or repeating their delusion. The Western standard repeats delusions. Derek is not that person. I've seen Derek be very kind to people. I've seen Derek in a glass box at a UCP convention where everyone walked by and tapped on the glass and mocked him. That person knows what humanity is. It's unfortunate that they also know the value of $1. I hope their behavior improves, but if I could rip on them, that doesn't help anyone. But if you see those cartoons again, think of me covered in someone else's pee crying all afternoon, because it happens. You know,
Do you think that there's, I mean, one of the things that's fascinating to me about it, and it's been pointed out by a good number of folks as well, whenever we see these stories, air quote stories, about trans people assaulting or trying to be predators against kids, it's always somebody who is a trans woman in a woman's washroom. And it's the little girls that we're worried about. I have yet to see one of these stories where, oh no, there's a trans man in a boys, men's, male washroom. We should be worried about that too. Like it seems to me that there's a little bit of just a lot of sort of latent misogyny embedded in all of these urban legends. And I think that that's an important part that we have to reconcile with. What do you make of that?
well, I'll open that. It's not my forte or expertise. I can provide some commentary on the matter. If you take a women's ed class or sex ed or diversity, sexuality or gender diversity course, a lot of times they'll point to bathrooms. And I'm going to speak specifically in dormitory setups or in, for me, a lot of military bases and universities, you have bathrooms. And the men's bathrooms are all set up in a big open spot. Sometimes people call them gangbang showers. Because being a man, for some people, being a man is being seen as like the toughest guy who has no problem of other people seeing their manhood. Whether that's true or not. Women's bathroom, private stalls, private world, not part of public, not on display. And we live in a world that for 100 years built buildings that way and built doors for one type of person and doors for another type of person. And well, if that person didn't look like this, then there's another door and you can't use this fountain. A world where there's one right way to live for each category and we must categorize everything. That's not reality. The reality is a lot of people who want to push that world see folks like me as, how could you, but you had everything. You were a white man. I was not a white man. People saw it that way. I benefited in many ways and I learned of hurdles that I'd only read about before. But people who betray their truth and the only right way to live in the world are going into spaces of people that I don't understand at all. And it's very common that people who have problem with trans people being in bathrooms, any bathroom, because it's realistically, they don't want me in a men's bathroom, they don't want me in a women's bathroom, they don't want me around. And those types of people have a nice Venn diagram that I like to call a circle with people who have grown up or have found a world of misogyny that they like. I did everything right, but the women didn't come for me. Well, maybe that's because they're human beings. And that's how human beings work. well, I deserve this and the world is wrong and everything's wrong. And if only this person peed in this spot, everything would be welcome back in my. That's not how reality works. Like, it's great for people to do whatever they want on their free time, to live whatever lives they want. But people who define their world by gatekeeping everyone, they shouldn't be listened to. They're going to ramble all day. We live in an age where they can get together. But if 50 people are yelling at clouds, they're still yelling at clouds. If 50 people are talking about how they tie onions to their belt, they're tying onions to their belt. It's stupid. They can do it. I'm going to do other things with my life. Don't give these people the time of day, but realize when the infection is spreading. And remember, the only way we stop the infection is with love and kindness and acceptance and giving those people a path back. I'll go back to that hairy leather guy. He talks a lot about some good stories from this book that's called The Bible, and they have some really good stories in it. And one is called The Prodigal Son. Went away, came back, was accepted. It amazes me for people who have read so much, they have read so little.
Well, there's a lot of different kinds of stories in that book too. One of my favorite pieces of TV ever is 3 Minutes from the West Wing, where President Bartlett riffs on. Let's talk about some of those stories. But it's going back to the one other thing that I just wanted to add is it almost seems to me like the people who are most upset about a trans woman being in a woman's washroom, I honestly wonder if they've ever set foot in a woman's washroom, because y'all get stalls.
Like, there's
I'm a trans femme non-binary person, but I caucus with the women's bathroom. But yeah, this stalls. It's private. It's pretty much the same. There's less urinals normally.
Well, this is
unless it was designed for men and then converted to be a women's room.
In men's washrooms, like you said, they tend to be much more open. But in women's washrooms, from the ones that I have been in, by professional requirement, let's just be clear,
accidents happen there. There's a lot of slip and falls. Like,
yes,
thank goodness paramedics go help people as opposed to be worried what someone on a street corner is going to go and yell. It's brutal that they're going to be yelling, but at least you help that person.
But there's walls and doors and stuff. Like, I can't think of it's so much. Women's washrooms are so much more secure than men's, and so it's telling to me that you have largely men who are getting largely upset over trans people being in the washrooms that they caucus in.
I don't think we need to define it as largely men. It doesn't matter what gender identity they have. It's like they're just greasy people. Like, they don't want other folks to go to the bathroom. I don't care if they're men or women or identify in any other way. It's like, we don't need to defining these people as men says that men should behave this way, and that's not what being a man is about. I'm no man, Lord knows, but that ain't what the book said, and that ain't what the tutorials I went on said.
Okay, fair enough. Let's go back to Trans Day of Visibility. What do you want people to know? How should people, in your opinion, recognize, acknowledge, celebrate Trans Day of Visibility?
It's Trans Day of Visibility, not make the trans people you know visible today. There's a common experience, or I've heard it from many people saying Trans Day of Visibility for me is every day. For some people, they don't want to talk about it, and for some people, they do. It's about creating a framework and a consenting framework of, do we want to celebrate this? Because, like, there are days I think back to experience, I don't want to remember this. I don't want to have a whole day of people celebrating a point that I don't want celebrated, or don't want to celebrate with a broader crowd or whatever it may be. That aside, point two. So point one, it's Trans Day of Visibility as opposed to making specific people visible. Two, I would say there's a Trans Day of Remembrance where we mourn those who are dead. Visibility is about making both the liberties and the joys of transness, but also all the barriers that face. So it's a two-sided coin of, we live in a world where we can unlock all these doors and make sure these people are protected. But we also live in a world where we have laws and all these tools to make sure these people belong and are protected, and they're not. They're not able to get there. So it's that balance. One, don't force on people. Two, uh, two, one, don't force on people. Two, make visible the liberties just as much as the barriers. Three is have fun. I, it's only a day, but see what you can carry through. I'd say throughout the year, throughout your life. If you don't know something, maybe this is the day that you Google. Make it significant, especially if you don't know anything, especially if you are coming from the feeling of these people are pushing it on me. Maybe use this day of realizing what would motivate a group of people pushing an agenda of using other people's names. What would motivate people to stop a sentence and say, no? What would motivate someone walking away from having it all, whether it's being a very, however they were perceived to be who they are? And then at the same time, get gritty. Celebrate. When you celebrate the direct liberty of one person, you're also celebrating the indirect liberty that you enjoy. Because the biggest loss that these bigots are missing out on is how many people don't they get to benefit. They get in the way of having good collaboration or good I work in a land that has a lot of conservatives. 20% get really grumpy and don't want to play in the sandbox. 80%, we have a blast. We disagree on a lot of things, but we get stuff done that we all want to get done, as opposed to being grumpy and just bitching all day about burr, 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 burr.
Okay. Anything else you want people to hear? Anything else we want people to know? Any messages you want to get out there? The floor is yours.
When trans people thrive, trans people live. For every person you know that's visible, there's probably a person who's not visible. Don't force anything on anyone, whether it be forcing them to come to terms with their transness or to share or to platform. But also use it as a perspective that, like, we live in a place where if someone says who they are, believe them and treat them that way, as opposed to ex-professor, no professional association certificate who says there's only one right way to live. Well, if he believed in that, he should retire because he got kicked out of the one right way to be a psychiatrist. If someone is yelling negatively about a group, whether it be trans or any other group, ask yourself what type of system built a world where they're okay doing this on the street and other people are okay with this driving by. Realize you can't change everything, but realize that you can use this day as a day to go down a new path, or a path that you want to have, a path to hopefully expand liberty for others, hopefully expand accepting and belonging, hopefully realizing some of the barriers or opening doors where you can, or giving stage and space. I'm a member of this club that I really believe in. I was talking to some friends about us being very visible with them, and they were there and they're appreciative, but they also go in front of the line. So it's like, okay, that can happen in any group or any sort of. Sometimes being a good ally or being a good cameo is using the opportunity you have to afford someone space to breathe, to stand up, to grow, or however that may be. But you can't force that on others. That's the narrative. Trans day visibility is living in a place that can promise so much, that has the opportunity to live up to all of those promises, and that you don't have to experience any of that to know that you've liberated another human being. In places in this world, it is against the law to be who you are. People luck out in those countries to be born in a setup that's lawful. We live in a place that woke up and has made a lot of errors in how it treats people, but focuses on getting better. So happy Trans Day of Visibility.
There we go.
Give money to a trans person. That's the other thing. I've been told to, if you see trans people, give them money on that day.
Okay, I did not know that one.
Well, we're seeing if it plays. That's so.
There we go. Mattie, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat tonight. I got to say, you have a gentleness and a compassion in the face of some pretty remarkable adversity and hatred. It is always really humbling for me to see how people who have, in many ways, an uphill battle to deal with, people who are just insecure and hateful, do so with grace and dignity. And I just props. That's all I got to say.
Oh, well, thanks. I'm glad to live in a world where we're able to bring folks together and to bring audiences and listen. I'm really appreciative of you sharing the platform, but also the listeners for tuning in. You bring perspectives that I don't know if you agree with or you disagree with, but you bring them to the fore and you let them be spoken about. I'm glad that I got to pitch things that'll improve my world, but I know that every time you air, you're improving things.
Oh, well, I don't know about that, but I think this episode might. Thank you so much again, Mattie.
Thank you. And thanks, the audience.
As always, if you appreciate the kind of content that we're trying to produce here at The Breakdown, we would love it if you swung by our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/thebreakdownab and signed up for a small monthly sponsorship of the work that we're trying to do here. It is because of the support that we receive from our Patreon sponsors that we're able to continually up our game, and it is tremendously appreciated. So I want to throw a big thank you out to them, and you can go ahead and visit that website and join and support us as well, because we need all the help we can get. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much for listening and being part of these important conversations. And we will see you next time on The Breakdown.